The laundry hung like ghosts in the evening light, each piece dripping water onto the packed dirt behind the boarding house. And Adelaide Norton stood among them with her hands raw and aching, invisible as always to every soul who passed by on their way to somewhere more exciting. She had been doing laundry in Weaverville, California since she was 16 years old, and now at 23, her hands told the story of every sheet she had scrubbed, every shirt she had beaten against the washboard, every stain she had coaxed out with lye soap and determination. The year was 1878, and the gold rush had long since faded from these Northern California hills, leaving behind a town of steady folks who worked hard and rarely looked twice at the quiet woman who kept their clothes clean. Adelaide was not ugly, though she believed herself to be. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father, a miner who drank more than he prospected, had made it clear she would never be the kind of woman men wrote poems about. She was too tall, he said, too plain, too serious. When he died 3 years ago, leaving her nothing but debts, she had taken the only work available to an unmarried woman with no family and no prospects. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, had been kind enough to let her stay in a small room off the kitchen in exchange for washing everything that passed through the establishment. The work was endless. Miners, ranch hands, travelers, they all came through Weaverville, and they all needed their clothes washed. Adelaide rose before dawn to heat water, spent her days scrubbing and wringing and hanging, and fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. The other women in town barely acknowledged her. She was useful, necessary even, but not someone worth knowing. The men never looked at her at all, which suited her fine most days. She had learned not to hope for things that would never come. It was a Tuesday in late September when everything changed. Adelaide was carrying a basket of wet linens to the clothesline, her arms straining under the weight, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats on the main street. Horses came and went constantly in Weaverville, so she paid no attention until a voice called out, deep and warm and entirely unfamiliar. "Madam, that looks mighty heavy. Can I offer you a hand?" Adelaide looked up, startled, fully expecting the speaker to be addressing someone else. But there was no one else in the yard, and the man on the chestnut horse was looking directly at her. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of summer sky. He wore dusty trail clothes and had the lean, weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. What struck her most, though, was that he was smiling at her like she was worth smiling at. "I can manage," she said automatically, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. No one ever offered to help her. She did not know what to do with the offer. The man swung down from his horse with easy grace and tied the reins to the fence post. "I am sure you can, madam, but that does not mean you should have to." He walked over and reached for the basket. "Please." "It would be my pleasure." Adelaide found herself stepping back, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her dress was faded and damp, her hair coming loose from its pins, her hands red and chapped. "You will get your clothes wet," she protested weakly. "Clothes dry," he said simply, and took the basket from her arms before she could argue further. The weight lifted, and Adelaide felt strangely unbalanced without it. "Where do these go?" She pointed mutely to the clothesline, and he carried the basket over like it weighed nothing at all. As he set it down, he turned and tipped his hat to her, a gesture so courteous and deliberate that Adelaide felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Name is Garrett Irving," he said. "Just rode in from Colorado. I am looking for work, and I heard Weaverville might have some opportunities for a man willing to work hard." Adelaide Norton, she managed, though her name felt strange on her tongue. When had anyone last asked for it? I do laundry for the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson is the owner. She might know about work. Much obliged for the information, Miss Norton. He said her name like it mattered, like she mattered, and Adelaide felt something crack open inside her chest, some long sealed place she had thought would stay closed forever. I will go speak with her. But first, might I help you hang these? Seems only right to finish what I started. You do not have to do that, Adelaide said, bewildered by this whole strange interaction. Men did not help with laundry. Men certainly did not help women like her. I know I do not have to, Garrett said, already reaching for a sheet. I want to. So they hung the laundry together in the fading light, and Adelaide tried to understand what was happening. Garrett Irving worked with the efficiency of someone accustomed to chores, snapping sheets straight and pinning them securely. He asked her questions as they worked, simple things about the town and the people and the weather, and he listened to her answers like they interested him. How long have you been doing laundry work? He asked, hanging one of Mr. Patterson's shirts. 7 years, Adelaide said, since I was 16. That is a long time to be working so hard, Garrett observed. There was no pity in his voice, just acknowledgement, and Adelaide found herself responding to it. It is honest work, she said, defensive despite herself. I am grateful to have it. Of course it is honest, Garrett agreed. I did not mean to suggest otherwise. I just think you must be very strong to have done it for so long. My mother used to do washing for other families when times were hard. I remember how exhausted she would be at the end of the day. Adelaide looked at him with new eyes. Your mother did laundry. She did whatever she had to do to keep us fed after my father died, Garrett said matter-of-factly. Took in washing, sewed, cleaned houses. She was the hardest working person I ever knew. Taught me that there is no shame in any kind of honest labor, and that the people who do the work others do not want to do deserve the most respect, not the least. Something warm unfurled in Adelaide's chest. She had spent so many years being invisible, being dismissed, being nothing more than the laundry woman. To hear someone speak of her work with respect, to be looked at by a man who saw her as a person rather than a function, it was almost too much to bear. They finished hanging the laundry in companionable silence, and when the last piece was secured, Garrett turned to her with that easy smile again. Thank you for your company, Miss Norton. It has been a pleasure to meet you. Likewise, Adelaide said, the word barely a whisper. She watched as he untied his horse and led it toward the front of the boarding house, his boots kicking up little clouds of dust. Just before he disappeared around the corner, he turned and tipped his hat to her again, and Adelaide stood frozen in place, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Mrs. Henderson gave Garrett Irving a room that very night. The boarding house always had space for a paying customer, and Garrett had money enough for a week's rent and meals. Adelaide learned this at dinner, which she took in the kitchen after serving the boarders in the dining room. Mrs. Henderson was a plump, practical woman in her 50s who liked to talk while Adelaide ate. Nice young man, that Garrett Irving, Mrs. Henderson said, stirring a pot of stew for tomorrow. Polite, clean, says he is looking for ranch work. I told him about the Mitchell place. They are always needing hands. Adelaide nodded, keeping her eyes on her plate. She did not trust herself to speak about Garrett Irving without revealing too much. Strangest thing, though, Mrs. Henderson continued. He asked about you. Adelaide's head snapped up. About me. Wanted to know if you took all your meals in the kitchen or if you ever ate with the boarders. I told him you preferred the kitchen, which is the truth, is not it? Mrs. Henderson gave her a shrewd look. Why would a young man be asking about you, Adelaide? I have no idea, Adelaide said, her pulse racing. He helped me hang laundry earlier. Perhaps he was just being polite. Polite, Mrs. Henderson repeated, her tone suggesting she did not quite believe it. "Well, just you be careful, girl. You have a good situation here, and I would hate to see you lose your head over a handsome face." "I will not," Adelaide promised. But that night, lying in her narrow bed, she could not stop thinking about blue eyes and a tipped hat, and the way Garrett Irving had said her name like it was worth remembering. The next morning, Adelaide rose in the dark as always and began heating water for the day's washing. Wednesday was sheets day, which meant stripping all the beds in the boarding house and replacing them with clean linens. It was back-breaking work, made worse by having to haul the heavy wet sheets to the line and then wrestle them into submission. She was in the middle of scrubbing a particularly stubborn stain when she heard boots on the back steps. She looked up to find Garrett Irving standing in the doorway of the wash-house, hat in hand. "Morning, Miss Norton," he said. "Mrs. Henderson said I might find you out here." Adelaide's hand stilled in the soapy water. "Is something wrong with your room?" "Not at all. Everything is perfect." He stepped inside, ducking slightly to clear the low door frame. "I am heading out to the Mitchell Ranch to inquire about work, but I wanted to ask you something first." "Yes." Adelaide's voice came out breathless, which mortified her. "Would you allow me to help you with the heavy work when I get back? I know yesterday you said you could manage, but I have a few hours free this afternoon, and I would be happy to lend a hand." He held up a hand before she could protest. "My mother would haunt me if she knew I was staying in a place where a woman was doing heavy labor and I did not offer to help. It would ease my conscience considerably." Adelaide wanted to say no. She was not a charity case. She had been doing this work alone for years and did not need anyone's pity. But the truth was, her back ached constantly, her shoulders were always sore, and the thought of someone helping her, even just once, was so tempting she could barely stand it. "I cannot pay you," she said finally. "I am not asking for payment," Garrett said. "I am asking if I can be neighborly." "Then yes," Adelaide heard herself say. "Thank you." His smile was like sunshine. "I will be back after lunch." He was true to his word. Adelaide had just finished washing the last load of sheets when Garrett appeared in the yard, sleeves already rolled up. He had gotten the job at the Mitchell Ranch, he told her, starting tomorrow. But today, he was hers to command. They worked together through the afternoon, and Adelaide found herself relaxing in his presence. Garrett was easy to talk to, never pressing her but always interested when she did speak. He told her about growing up in a small town in Missouri, about his mother and two younger sisters, about learning ranch work as a teenager, and eventually heading west to find his fortune. "Not much fortune so far," he admitted with a self-deprecating grin as they hung the last sheet. "But I am not starving and I have work I am good at. That seems like enough." "It is more than many have," Adelaide said quietly. "It is more than you have," Garrett observed, and there was something sharp in his tone, something almost angry. "You work harder than anyone I have seen, Miss Norton, and from what I can tell, you barely have enough to get by." Adelaide stiffened. "I manage." "I am sure you do, but you should not have to just manage. You should have a life that is more than constant work and exhaustion." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I am sorry. That was forward of me. It is none of my business." "No, it is not," Adelaide agreed, but her voice was soft, not sharp. No one had ever been angry on her behalf before. It made her feel strange and warm and frightened all at once. "But I appreciate your concern." They walked back to the boarding house together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. At the back door, Garrett paused. "Miss Norton, would you do me the honor of taking a walk with me on Sunday afternoon? I know I am new in town and you do not know me well, but I would very much like to spend more time in your company." Adelaide stared at him. A walk. He was asking her for a walk, like she was a normal woman worth courting. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Garrett looked genuinely confused. Why what? Why would you want to spend time with me? I am just the laundry woman. I am nothing special. Adelaide, he said, using her first name for the first time, and the sound of it on his lips made her shiver. You are kind and hard-working and honest. You are stronger than you know, and when you smile, which you do not do often enough, it lights up your whole face. Those seem like excellent reasons to want to spend time with someone. Adelaide felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. I am not used to people being kind to me. Then they are fools, Garrett said simply. So will you walk with me on Sunday? Yes, Adelaide whispered. I will. Sunday dawned clear and bright, and Adelaide spent far too long trying to make herself presentable. She only had 2 dresses, both worn and faded, and no matter what she did with her hair, it refused to cooperate. Finally, she gave up and settled for clean and neat, which was the best she could manage. Garrett met her at the boarding house at 2 o'clock, looking freshly washed and wearing what was clearly his best shirt. He offered her his arm, and Adelaide took it hesitantly, hyper-aware of every point where they touched. They walked through town, and Adelaide felt the stares of the other residents like brands on her skin. She could practically hear their thoughts. What was that handsome young cowboy doing with Adelaide Norton? What could he possibly see in her? Garrett seemed oblivious to the attention. He kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her about his first few days at the Mitchell Ranch, asking her about her life in Weaverville, making her laugh with stories about his sister's antics back home. Mary, the youngest, decided she wanted to learn to rope like the ranch hands, he said, his eyes dancing with amusement. She practiced on the chickens. My mother was furious because half of them stopped laying from the stress, but Mary was so proud of herself we could not stay mad. How old is she? Adelaide asked, enchanted despite herself. She was 10 when I left, so she would be 12 now. Sarah, the middle one, is 15. They are probably both taller than my mother by now. I miss them terribly. His expression grew wistful. I send money home when I can and letters when I am settled somewhere long enough. It is hard, being so far from family. I would not know, Adelaide said quietly. I have been alone since my father died. Garrett's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. You do not have family at all. No one. My mother died when I was 8. I barely remember her. My father was not a good man. He drank and gambled and told me I was a disappointment. She did not know why she was telling him this. She never spoke about her father. When he died, I found out he had debts all over town. I sold everything we had to pay what I could, and Mrs. Henderson gave me work and a place to stay. That has been my life for the past 3 years. Adelaide, Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. You deserved better than that, perhaps, but we do not always get what we deserve. She looked up at him, trying to smile. I am managing, truly. You keep saying that, managing, as if that is all you are allowed to hope for. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You deserve more than just managing. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be cherished. You deserve someone to see you for who you are and think themselves the luckiest person alive. Adelaide's breath caught. Garrett, I know it is too soon to say things like this. I know I have only been here a few days. But Adelaide, from the moment I saw you struggling with that basket of laundry, trying so hard to do everything yourself, I could not stop thinking about you. You are beautiful and strong, and you do not even know it. I want to be the person who shows you. I am not beautiful, Adelaide protested weakly. You are to me, Garrett said, and he said it with such conviction that Adelaide almost believed him. May I court you properly? I do not have much to offer right now except hard work and honest intentions, but I promise I will do everything I can to make you happy." Adelaide thought about all the years of loneliness, all the years of being invisible, all the years of believing she would never be worth noticing. And here was Garrett Irving, looking at her like she hung the moon, asking permission to court her. "Yes," she said, and this time when the tears came, she let them fall. "Yes, you may court me." Garrett pulled her into his arms right there on the street, and Adelaide did not care who was watching. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she belonged somewhere to someone. She felt seen. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Garrett left for the Mitchell Ranch before dawn each day and returned at dusk, dirty and exhausted, but he always found time to help Adelaide with the heaviest chores. He carried water, hung sheets, split wood for the stove. Mrs. Henderson had stopped commenting on it, though Adelaide caught her watching them sometimes with a thoughtful expression. On Sundays, they walked together, exploring the hills around Weaverville, talking about everything and nothing. Garrett told her about his dreams of someday owning a small ranch. Nothing grand, just enough land to raise horses and cattle and have a home. Adelaide listened and dared, for the first time, to imagine a future different from the endless sameness of laundry and loneliness. "Do you ever think about leaving Weaverville?" Garrett asked one Sunday as they sat by the Trinity River, watching the water rush past. "Where would I go?" Adelaide countered. "I have no skills except washing clothes. I have no money. This is my life." "It does not have to be," Garrett said. "You could do anything, be anything." "That is easy for you to say. You are a man. You have options I will never have." She plucked at the grass beside her. "I am not complaining. I know my situation could be much worse, but I am also not fool enough to pretend I have choices I do not have." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "What if you did have a choice? What would you want?" Adelaide looked out at the river, letting herself imagine the impossible. "A home of my own. Not a room off someone else's kitchen, but a real home. A garden, maybe, chickens. A life that is not just surviving, but actually living." She laughed, embarrassed. "Foolish dreams." "Not foolish at all," Garrett said seriously. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, her heart suddenly pounding. His expression was so intense, so focused, that she felt naked under his gaze. "I have been saving money for years," he said. "Every spare cent I make goes into a bank account. I have been planning to buy land, start a ranch. It has been my goal since I was 16 years old." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "But lately, I have been thinking that none of it means anything if I do not have someone to share it with, someone to build a life with." "Garrett," Adelaide breathed, afraid to hope, afraid to believe what she thought he was saying. "I know it has only been a month. I know you barely know me. But Adelaide, I am falling in love with you. Actually, I think I started falling in love with you the moment you tried to insist you did not need help with that laundry basket, all stubborn pride and hidden strength." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I want to marry you. I want to give you that home you dream about, that garden, those chickens. I want to spend my life making sure you never have to just manage again." Adelaide's world tilted on its axis. "You want to marry me?" "But I have nothing. I am nothing." "You are everything," Garrett said fiercely. "And you are not nothing. You are the woman I want to wake up to every morning and fall asleep beside every night. You are the woman I want to build a life with. Please, Adelaide, say you will marry me." She should be cautious. She should be sensible. They had only known each other a month, and marriages made in haste often ended in regret. But Adelaide had spent her entire life being cautious and sensible, and where had it gotten her? Here was a man who saw her, truly saw her, and wanted her anyway. Here was a chance at happiness she had never dared to dream of. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Yes, I will marry you." Garrett's whoop of joy startled a flock of birds from a nearby tree. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her, gentle and reverent, and Adelaide felt the last of her walls crumble. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Weaverville. Mrs. Henderson stood as Adelaide's witness, and one of Garrett's fellow ranch hands stood as his. Adelaide wore her least faded dress and a wreath of wildflowers Garrett had picked that morning. She had never felt more beautiful. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Garrett kissed her like she was precious, like she was cherished, like she was loved. Adelaide kissed him back and thought that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could come true even for laundry women, Mrs. Henderson allowed them to stay in Garrett's room at the boarding house while they saved money for their own place. It was small and modest, but it was theirs, and Adelaide marveled at the simple joy of sharing space with another person, of having someone to talk to at the end of the day, of falling asleep in Garrett's arms and waking up to his smile. She continued doing laundry for Mrs. Henderson, and Garrett kept working at the Mitchell Ranch. Every penny they did not need for immediate expenses went into the jar Garrett kept hidden under a loose floorboard. They were saving for land for their dream. "Another good week," Garrett said one Saturday night, counting out his wages. He added the money to the jar and rattled it experimentally. "We are getting close, Adelaide. Maybe by spring we will have enough for a down payment on a small piece of land." Adelaide set aside the shirt she was mending and moved to sit beside him on the bed. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Buy land, I mean. It is such a risk." "Life is a risk," Garrett said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "But I would rather risk everything on building something of our own than spend my life working for someone else's dream. Would not you?" "Yes," Adelaide admitted. She leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and leather and the outdoors. "I am just afraid sometimes. Afraid that I will wake up and this will all have been a dream, that I will be back in my little room off the kitchen, alone again." "You are not alone," Garrett said, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You will never be alone again. I promise you that, Adelaide Irving." Adelaide Irving. She still was not used to her married name, to the reality that she was someone's wife, that she belonged to someone and someone belonged to her. She kissed her husband, pouring all her love and gratitude into it, and Garrett responded with equal fervor. Later, lying in the darkness with Garrett's arm around her and his breathing slow and even in sleep, Adelaide allowed herself to be happy. Truly, unreservedly happy. It was a new feeling, still strange and a little frightening, but she thought she could get used to it. Winter came to Weaverville, bringing cold rain and the occasional dusting of snow on the higher peaks. The laundry work became even harder as Adelaide struggled to dry clothes in the damp weather, but Garrett helped whenever he could, and his presence made even the most tedious tasks bearable. In January, Garrett came home from the ranch with news. "Mr. Mitchell is selling off some of his land," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. 20 acres on the north edge of his property. It has water, good grazing, and a small cabin. He is asking a fair price, and he said if I am interested, he will hold it for us until spring so we can get the money together. 20 acres, Adelaide repeated, trying to imagine that much space belonging to them. "Is that enough for a ranch?" "It is enough to start," Garrett said. "We can run a small herd, grow hay, maybe raise some horses. It will be hard work, but we can do it. Together, together." That word still made Adelaide's heart swell. "How much do we need?" Garrett told her, and Adelaide did the calculations in her head. They were close, but not close enough. Not yet. I could take on more work, she said slowly. Some of the families in town have asked if I would do their washing too. I always said no because I could not handle more on my own, but if you could help, no, Garrett said firmly. You are already working yourself to exhaustion, Adelaide. I am not going to let you take on more. But if it means getting our land sooner, it is not worth it if you make yourself sick in the process. He took her hands, his expression serious. We will get there when we get there. I would rather wait an extra year and have you healthy and happy than push you past your limits for the sake of a few months. Adelaide wanted to argue, but the fierce protectiveness in Garrett's eyes stopped her. He loved her. He truly loved her, enough to put her well-being above his dreams. The realization made her throat tight. I love you, she said, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. I love you too, Garrett replied and kissed her forehead. We will figure this out, I promise. The solution came from an unexpected source. In February, a family arrived in Weaverville, migrants from the East looking to start fresh in California. The Hartleys had 3 young children and very little money, and Mrs. Hartley was heavily pregnant with a 4th. They took a room at the boarding house while Mr. Hartley looked for work, and Adelaide found herself drawn to the exhausted woman trying to manage 3 children under the age of 6 while in the final weeks of pregnancy. Let me help, Adelaide offered one afternoon, finding Mrs. Hartley struggling to wash her children's clothes while keeping the baby from crawling into the muddy yard. I cannot pay you, Mrs. Hartley said, close to tears. We barely have enough for the room. I am not asking for payment, Adelaide said, echoing the words Garrett had said to her all those months ago. I am asking if I can be neighborly. So Adelaide washed the Hartley family's clothes and helped mind the children, and in return, Mrs. Hartley taught her to sew properly. Adelaide had always done basic mending, but Mrs. Hartley was a skilled seamstress, and under her tutelage, Adelaide learned to create garments from scratch, to embroider, to do delicate handwork. You have a talent for this, Mrs. Hartley said, watching Adelaide complete a complicated seam. You could make money doing this, you know. There is no seamstress in Weaverville, and people always need clothes made or mended. The idea took root. Adelaide began offering sewing services in addition to laundry, and to her surprise, the work came quickly. She made shirts for miners, dresses for the saloon girls, Sunday clothes for families. The money was good, much better than laundry alone, and for the first time, Adelaide felt like she was contributing equally to the future she and Garrett were building when Mrs. Hartley's baby came in March. Adelaide helped with the delivery, holding the laboring woman's hand and wiping her brow while the doctor worked. She had never witnessed a birth before, had never really thought about children of her own, but watching the exhausted joy on Mrs. Hartley's face as she held her newborn daughter, Adelaide felt something shift inside her. Would you want children? She asked Garrett that night, lying in the darkness. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Do you? I think so. Maybe. Someday when we have our land and are more settled. She turned to face him. I never thought about it before I met you. I could not imagine bringing a child into my old life. But now, with you, I can imagine a future with a family. I would love to have children with you, Garrett said softly. When you are ready, there is no rush. But Adelaide found herself thinking about it more and more. About a little boy with Garrett's blue eyes. About a daughter she could teach to sew. About a family of her own, something permanent and real and hers. Spring arrived, bringing wildflowers to the hills and new life to Weaverville. Adelaide's sewing business had grown enough that she was able to cut back on laundry work, much to her body's relief. Her hands, for the first time in years, were not constantly raw and cracked. She and Garrett counted their savings and found they had enough for the down payment on the Mitchell land with some left over for supplies and livestock. "We can do this," Garrett said, his voice full of wonder. "Adelaide, we can actually do this." They met with Mr. Mitchell on a bright April morning. He was a gruff man in his 60s, weathered by years of hard work, but he seemed to approve of Garrett and the way Garrett's hand never left Adelaide's back. "You will need to build a bigger house eventually," Mr. Mitchell said as he showed them the property. "The cabin is barely more than a shack, but it is sound and it will keep the rain off your heads while you get established." Adelaide barely heard him. She was too busy looking at the land, at the creek that ran through it, at the open meadow perfect for grazing, at the small stand of trees that would provide shade and lumber. It was beautiful. It was theirs. They signed the papers in town that afternoon, and Adelaide felt like she was floating as they walked back to the boarding house. She owned land. She, Adelaide Norton, who was now Adelaide Irving, who had been nothing and nobody, owned 20 acres of California earth. "We should celebrate," Garrett said, grinning like a fool. "Let me buy you dinner at the hotel restaurant, a proper celebration dinner." So they ate roast beef and potatoes and pie, and Adelaide felt like a queen. Other diners stared at them, the cowboy and the former laundry woman, but Adelaide did not care. Let them stare. She had something they could never take from her, a husband who loved her and a future full of possibility. They moved to their land in May. Mrs. Henderson was sorry to lose Adelaide's help but happy for them both. "You deserve this," she told Adelaide the day they left. "You have worked hard for too long with too little reward. I hope you find all the happiness in the world." The cabin was indeed barely more than a shack. Just one room with a fireplace and a packed dirt floor, but Adelaide attacked it with determination. She scrubbed every surface, made curtains for the single window, covered the rough table with a cloth she embroidered herself. Garrett built a proper bed frame and filled a mattress with straw, and Adelaide sewed sheets from flour sacks she bleached white. "It is not much," Garrett said, looking around their home with a critical eye. "It is ours," Adelaide replied. "That makes it everything." They worked from dawn to dusk, building fence lines, clearing land, planting a garden. Garrett bought a small herd of cattle and 2 mares he planned to breed. Adelaide set up a chicken coop and acquired 6 hens and a rooster. Every night, they fell into bed exhausted and filthy and completely content. In June, Adelaide realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then told Garrett over dinner one evening. "I am going to have a baby," she said, her voice shaking. "Sometime in February, I think." Garrett dropped his fork. "A baby? Adelaide, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I think so." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, his voice full of awe. "You are going to be a mother, I am going to be a father. Adelaide, this is wonderful." Adelaide buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed by emotion. "I am frightened," she admitted. "What if I am not a good mother? What if something goes wrong? What if—" "You are going to be an amazing mother," Garrett interrupted. "You are strong and kind and capable of anything, and I am going to be here every step of the way. We are in this together, remember, together." Adelaide clung to that word, to the solid reality of her husband's arms around her, and let herself believe it would be all right. The pregnancy was not easy. Adelaide was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. She tried to hide it from Garrett, to keep working as hard as always, but he saw through her pretense immediately. "You need to rest more," he insisted. "Let me handle the heavy work." "I am pregnant, not dying," Adelaide argued. "Women have been having babies while working for all of history." "I can manage." There is that word again, Garrett said, frustrated. Manage. Why do you always settle for managing when you could actually take care of yourself? They fought about it, their first real fight as a married couple, and Adelaide hated it. But Garrett would not back down, and eventually, Adelaide had to admit he was right. She was pushing herself too hard, trying to prove she was not weak, and it was not good for her or the baby. So she learned to accept help, to let Garrett take on more of the physical work while she focused on things that did not require heavy lifting. She sewed, tended the garden, cared for the chickens, cooked meals. It chafed sometimes, this enforced limitation, but as the baby grew inside her and she felt the first flutters of movement, Adelaide found herself grateful for Garrett's stubbornness. By autumn, her condition was obvious to anyone who looked. She could no longer fit into her regular dresses and had to let out the seams. Her back ached constantly, and her ankles swelled by the end of each day. But she had never been happier. Garrett talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child about the ranch they were building, the life they would have. Adelaide would lie there, running her hands over her swollen stomach, and marvel at how much her life had changed in just over a year. In November, they had their first real scare. Adelaide was in the garden when she felt a sudden sharp pain and looked down to see blood on her skirt. She called for Garrett, her voice high with panic, and he came running from the barn. "The baby," she gasped. "Something is wrong." Garrett got her inside and sent one of their neighbors for the doctor. Adelaide lay on the bed, terrified, praying to a God she was not sure she believed in. "Please do not take this from me. Please let my baby be all right." The doctor, when he arrived, was cautiously optimistic. "The baby still has a heartbeat, but you need complete bed rest for the next several weeks, Mrs. Irving. No work at all. If you want to carry this child to term, you need to stay off your feet." Adelaide wanted to argue, but Garrett's face was so pale, so frightened, that she swallowed her protests. "I will do whatever I need to do." The next weeks were agony. Adelaide had never been good at sitting still, and being confined to bed while Garrett did everything drove her nearly mad. But she could feel the baby moving, reassurance that her child was still alive, still growing, and she endured. Garrett was incredible. He cooked, cleaned, tended the animals, and still found time to sit with Adelaide each evening, reading to her from the newspaper or telling her about his day. He never complained, never made her feel like a burden, and Adelaide fell in love with him all over again. By December, the doctor declared Adelaide out of danger. She could move around the cabin, though she was not to do any heavy work. Adelaide was so relieved she cried, and Garrett held her while she sobbed out all the fear and worry she had been holding inside. "I thought I was going to lose the baby," she confessed. "I thought I was being punished for being happy." "That is not how the world works," Garrett said, though his voice was rough with his own emotion. "Bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people, and none of it is punishment or reward. It is just life." "I do not want to just survive anymore," Adelaide said. "I want to live. I want to raise our baby and build our ranch and grow old with you. I want all of it, Garrett." "Then we will have it," Garrett promised. "All of it." Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly in their cabin. Garrett had carved a small wooden horse for the baby, and Adelaide had sewn tiny gowns and blankets. They hung a wreath on the door and made a simple meal, and Adelaide thought it was the best Christmas she had ever had. "Next year our baby will be here," Garrett said, his hand on her belly. "We will be a family of 3. "A family," Adelaide repeated, loving the sound of it. She had been alone for so long, and now she would never be alone again. The baby came on a cold February night during a rainstorm. Adelaide's labor started just after supper, and Garrett immediately sent for the doctor and the neighbor woman who had agreed to help with the birth. Then he paced the cabin like a caged animal while Adelaide labored. It was long and painful and terrifying. There were moments when Adelaide thought she could not do it, when she wanted to give up, but Garrett was there, holding her hand, wiping her face, telling her she was strong, she was brave, she could do this. And she did. Just as dawn broke and the rain finally stopped, Adelaide gave birth to a son. He came into the world screaming, his little fists waving, and Adelaide thought she had never heard a more beautiful sound. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the baby on Adelaide's chest. "A healthy boy." Adelaide looked down at her son, at his wrinkled red face and shock of dark hair, and felt her heart crack wide open. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, little one." Garrett was beside her, staring at their son with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is perfect. Adelaide, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" Adelaide asked, unable to look away from the tiny miracle in her arms. They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything. Now, looking at her son, Adelaide knew exactly what his name should be. "James," she said. "After your father." Garrett's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. James Irving, what do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Garrett said hoarsely. "Just like you, just like him." The first weeks with baby James were exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's blue eyes and what promised to be his mother's serious expression. Adelaide had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never been so happy. Garrett was a natural father. He walked the floor with James when he was fussy, changed nappies without complaint, and sang lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. Adelaide would watch them together, her gruff cowboy husband and their tiny son, and feel so much love she thought her chest might burst. As spring returned to their land, Adelaide began to find her rhythm again. She nursed the baby, kept the house, tended the garden. Garrett worked the ranch, building it into something they could be proud of. It was hard work, never-ending work, but it was theirs. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with James asleep in Adelaide's arms, Garrett said, "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, I mean. This life is not easy. You work as hard now as you did when you were doing laundry." Adelaide looked at him in surprise. "This is nothing like before. Before, I worked to survive. I worked because I had no choice, no future, no hope of anything better. Now I work because I am building something. I work alongside my husband, for our family, for our future. How could I possibly regret that?" "I just want you to be happy," Garrett said. "I want to give you the life you deserve." "You already have," Adelaide said softly. "Garrett, a year and a half ago I was invisible. I was the woman no one noticed, no one valued. I thought that was all I would ever be. And then you tipped your hat to me and saw me when no one else did. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just surviving another day. You gave me a life worth living. How could I want anything more than that?" Garrett pulled her close, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby. "I love you, Adelaide Irving. I loved you from the moment I saw you, and I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too," Adelaide replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The years passed and the ranch grew. They added more cattle, more horses. Garrett built a larger house, 2 stories with real floors and glass windows. Adelaide turned the old cabin into a workshop where she sewed clothes to sell in town, a business that brought in steady extra income. James grew into a sturdy, serious little boy who adored following his father around the ranch. When he was 3, Adelaide gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Garrett's sister. Sarah was quieter than James, with Adelaide's brown eyes and a sweet, gentle nature. When James was 6 and Sarah was 3, Adelaide found herself pregnant again. This baby came easier than the other two, a second daughter they named Emma, who arrived squalling and red-faced in the middle of July. With 3 children, the house was never quiet, never still, and Adelaide loved every chaotic moment. She had help now. A young woman from town named Lucy came 3 days a week to help with the house and the children, and Adelaide could focus on her sewing business and the garden and all the 1,000 tasks that came with running a ranch. Money was not plentiful, but there was always enough. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Garrett proved to be as good a father to 3 children as he had been to one. He taught James to ride and rope, read stories to Sarah and Emma every night, and made sure all his children knew they were loved. Adelaide would watch him with them and remember the lonely woman she had been, and feel grateful beyond measure for the life they had built together. When James was 10, Mr. Mitchell, their neighbor, decided to sell the rest of his land and move to San Francisco to live with his daughter. He offered Garrett first refusal on the property, another 40 acres that bordered their own. "We could do it," Garrett said, studying the numbers. "We have the money. It would mean taking on debt, but it would double our grazing land. We could expand the herd, maybe start breeding horses seriously." "What do you think we should do?" Adelaide asked. "I think we should do whatever you are comfortable with," Garrett replied. "This is your ranch too, Adelaide. You have as much say in its future as I do." Adelaide thought about it for a long moment. They had built something good here, something stable, but they had also always been about moving forward, about reaching for more. "Let us do it," she said finally. "Let us buy the land. We have worked hard. We have earned this." So they bought the Mitchell land, and the ranch became something bigger than either of them had originally dreamed. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased work, young men who lived in a bunkhouse Garrett built near the barn. The cattle herd grew. They started breeding horses, good solid ranch horses that sold well to other ranchers and farmers. Adelaide expanded her sewing business, taking on an apprentice, a young woman from town who wanted to learn the trade. She taught the girl everything Mrs. Hartley had taught her, and took pride in passing on the skills that had given her independence and purpose. The children grew. James developed a talent for working with horses and talked constantly about the ranch he would have someday. Sarah loved books and learning and made Adelaide teach her to read before she started school. Emma was fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees or trying to ride calves or getting into some mischief. Adelaide was 35 years old, mother to 3 children, wife to a man she loved more with each passing year, owner of a successful ranch and a thriving business. Sometimes she still could not quite believe it was all real, that this was actually her life. "You remember the day we met?" she asked Garrett one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. "Every detail," Garrett replied, reaching for her hand. "You were carrying a basket of laundry that looked like it weighed as much as you did. You had your jaw set in this stubborn line, determined to do it all yourself even though it was clearly too much. I took one look at you and knew you were something special." "I thought you were crazy," Adelaide admitted. "No one ever helped me. No one ever saw me. I did not know what to do with someone who did both." "I am glad I was crazy enough to stop," Garrett said. "I am glad I tipped my hat to the woman no one else noticed. Best decision I ever made." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, watching Emma try to convince James to let her ride his pony. "Do you ever miss it? The adventure of drifting from place to place, no ties, no responsibilities." "Not even once," Garrett said firmly. "This life, this ranch, you and the children, this is all I ever wanted. I just did not know it until I found you." When Adelaide was 42, tragedy struck. Garrett was helping a neighbor bring in a difficult horse when the animal panicked and kicked him. The blow caught him in the chest, breaking ribs and causing internal injuries. The doctor did what he could, but it was not enough. Garrett died 3 days later with Adelaide holding his hand and their grown children surrounding the bed. Adelaide thought the grief would destroy her. Garrett had been her everything, her partner, her love, her reason for getting up each morning. How was she supposed to go on without him? But she had 3 children who needed her, and a ranch that depended on her, and Garrett's voice in her head reminding her that she was strong, she was capable, she could do anything. So Adelaide buried her husband on a hill overlooking their land, and she kept going. James, now 20, stepped up to help run the ranch. Sarah, 17, managed the household and the younger children. Emma, 14, angry and grieving, acted out in 100 small ways until Adelaide sat her down and talked to her about loss and pain, and the importance of honoring those we love by living well. It was hard. Some days it was impossibly hard, but Adelaide had survived worse. She had survived her father's cruelty and her years of loneliness and the terror of nearly losing her first baby. She could survive this too. Years passed. The children grew up and started lives of their own. James married a nice girl from town, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch land. Sarah went to teacher's college and came back to teach at the Weaverville school. Emma, her wild child, married a cowboy as adventurous as she was, and moved to Montana to start their own ranch. Adelaide continued running her part of the ranch and her sewing business. She trained more apprentices, young women who needed skills and independence. She served on the church committee and helped found a library in Weaverville. She lived a full, rich life, though there was always an empty place where Garrett should have been. When she was 65, James suggested she retire and let him and his sons take over completely. Adelaide considered it and decided he was right. She sold her portion of the ranch to James for a fair price, kept the house Garrett had built for her, and finally allowed herself to rest. She spent her later years surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of whom loved the stories she told about the old days, about the cowboy who tipped his hat to a laundress no one noticed, about the ranch they built from nothing, about a love that changed everything. Adelaide Norton Irving died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, in the house her husband had built, on the land they had made their own. She was buried beside Garrett on the hill overlooking the ranch, and her children made sure their headstones touched, so they would be together forever. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, James had carved a simple epitaph. She was seen, she was loved, she was cherished. And it was true. From the moment Garrett Irving tipped his hat to her, Adelaide had been all those things. She had gone from invisible to invaluable, from alone to beloved, from merely surviving to truly living. Her life had not been easy, but it had been rich with love and purpose and family. In the end, that was all anyone could ask for. Adelaide had been happy. She had been loved, and she had loved in return with her whole heart. The laundry woman who no man noticed had become a woman who could never be forgotten, whose legacy lived on in the ranch, in her children and grandchildren, in the women she had taught and helped, in the life she had built from nothing but determination and love. It was, she thought in those final peaceful moments, more than enough. It was everything.